to be affordable. And I absolutely agree that it does need to be community supported. So similar to Emily, I'm glad to see those 3 rows to the top. And then, it does need to be feasible, or otherwise we're not going to be able to get it done.
And I apologize, Gail, for interrupting you with the recording. I goofed up on starting the recording, and that is my bad. So for folks just joining, this is the governance group meeting in April and May, day 2. And we are just getting started on talking about the end state goal that we're working towards and prioritizing different design elements that will go into that.
Well, I would have just blamed. Oh, just blamed. Yeah.
Can I ask you a question that we may have talked about this last time, but I'm not entirely clear what we mean when we say neighborhood.
I agree. It's a good point.
I didn't know how to rank it because I was like, well, I don't know that we've defined it. And I don't know how it's different than a mix of uses. One could say mix of uses. And one could also argue that a neighborhood includes homes for our community. So I'm wondering if those 2 or 3 could be sort of combined into one concept.
Yeah, and fill in here from other folks' memories when from the last conversation on neighborhood, this felt like it was a way of capturing that if we just put homes out there, it wouldn't make a neighborhood. We needed to think about some of those other elements that would make it a neighborhood: parks, services, things like that.
That's contradictory to our conversation now. Everybody kind of said our neighborhood is where we live.
Okay.
I think a neighborhood is like an easy place or like placeholder for things that we're going to have to explore this process to sort of flesh out the sense of place.
I think to a degree that it's, neighborhood A is townhouses, neighborhood B is condominiums, neighborhood C is single family homes. Are those one neighborhood or are they 3 individual neighborhoods?
Question.
Yeah, no,
Kind of talked about this yesterday a little bit too on so many different things. But to me, it's where someone wants to live, not because it's the only option, but it's attractive to live there.
Yeah, to me, it's like a sense of community, like coming home and seeing like all of your neighbors and people that are familiar to you.
You know where to drive slow because the
Yeah.
kid's gonna be in the middle of the street.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm told not to be. Or that.
Any other definitions of neighborhood that folks had in their head?
So I really appreciate Shannon's definition with the sense of community.
Yeah, I think you see the difference between places that have families that live there all the time. I mean, you just look at Sunlight. Sunlight has a lot of second homeowners. So there's certain pockets of vacancy that are in Sunlight and, maybe doesn't have the same vibrancy feel, still a neighborhood. But yeah, neighborhoods with working folks that are.
I don't know if you guys can hear me. This is Clark, and I'll be there in 1 second. But hearkening back to both the meeting where we talked about this with this group and also back to the conversations about neighborhood with the DST and some of the community engagement we did. I think all the themes you guys are talking about are spot on. Fundamental to the whole thing was the idea that people wanted this to be a place, not just a project. And that there is a feeling that sometimes we try to look at these things as projects and they feel like projects. And I think it was really Kathy actually who put a lot of thought into sort of articulating this a couple meetings ago, and just the idea that it really needs to feel like a place with all the interwoven elements you guys have been talking about.
And I was gonna say, the one thing I would put in there too is just multi-generational, right? I mean, again, it like you say, it's a place you want to be, but it encompasses the gamut in terms of, young people, families, elderly, et cetera. So hopefully, we would have those type of housing units that are suitable to the various different members of our community.
So as we flesh out a little bit of what neighborhood means, what we're articulating when we say this is an element of the design that we're working towards, does that change anybody's rankings with neighborhood? And then I bopped over to Emily and Gail so that we could get everybody's voices in first, but I want to return to the question that you raised, Dave, around scaled and flesh that out a little bit more in terms of, I think you posed like, are we working on a first phase, like a scaled first version of this? Or is the task of this group to think through the whole vision for this property long term? But that it will be a scaled out version.
Not advocate for just first phase.
In order for us to be successful, we will need, Dave, we need to demonstrate that we can do this. Not only do you need to demonstrate, I think, what is it, there's a whole adage about how do you eat an elephant, one bite at a time. And, if we go through an annexation, we have something that's working, well, then you can take another bite. To me, that makes sense, but it is different than, hey, what's the big picture for all of this property? It is.
I think there's a balancing act between focusing on the first phase and then making sure your infrastructure design is appropriate for larger build out over time. Like you don't want to box yourself in with the wrong size water line or over design for that. You can have as many problems with under design as over design on utilities. So just there needs to be some like overall idea of what should be held there, but as we design infrastructure, but then focus on the first phase.
Well, and I would argue you need to balance that with some of the uses as well, because if we do talk about non-residential uses in this area, it really makes sense to have those by the highway. And so you wouldn't want to just scale your non-residential uses for this first phase. You're going to want to scale it for ultimately what we think this would be built out, which means there may be a large portion, in this area that we're talking about that is just vacant land that would eventually be developed as commercial, because commercial is going to come after rooftop. So I think we have to give that some thought as well.
Yeah, that's like, especially when you start talking about grocery stores.
Right.
We had 15,000 square foot grocery store and 50,000. And it's 15,000 square foot and a developer that was willing to do that. But they were willing to do that because of anticipating 2,200 units.
Right.
At 200, 500 units, I don't know that you find that willing developer to do that. We could leave the space, we could build the building, but somebody has to buy into it.
Gail?
Yeah, thank you. I was going to say, I would just build on that from the sense that I think this is where it's important to get community and engagement and community input, because what we're talking about are trade-offs, right? I mean, in the sense of thinking about it from the perspective of, whether it's infrastructure or we know there's a desire for a larger grocery store, but things are going to cost, it's going to impact the cost and the feasibility. So from my perspective, it's about the education and identifying what the trade-offs are and making informed decisions with with community input and community engagement.
And not to get too far into the weeds, but our whole model of what we're building in terms of, use the grocery store example, 15,000 square feet, large convenience store. I mean, to just put it bluntly, but our delivery methods of groceries are going to change dramatically in the next 5 years. We're going to have a 50,000 square foot Amazon delivery center 20 miles down the road where they'll be dropping your groceries at your front door as opposed to going to the grocery store for some people, not all, but for some. And we don't really have that now. It's more go wait in an hour line at the post office. So like some things are gonna evolve and change, not that we can build that into the design, but I think it leads to flexibility as we're leaving space for commercial and other neighborhood support things.
And I will push back a little bit on what Angelica said before about her anti-Costco statements.
I'm not pro or anti-Costco.
But something like Costco, something like a super Target or whatever those things are, they are self-sustaining. People will go there to get their groceries or whatever it is they get. You know, they're employment factories that, employ hundreds of people in those places. So you put something like that there and the roofs that matter encompass a much larger area. Probably the entirety of Broward County and part of Moffett County. So I mean, that's just a pushback on that, the big box store thing.
So overall, I'm hearing that there's consensus in our 1 through 4 are strong. When it comes to this element of scaled, what I'm hearing is that we're working on a feasible first phase with an eye towards future phases, so that we're not losing sight of what might be possible implications down the line, but our focus is on a first phase. And that we look for that to get built out over time. Does anybody have heartburn over that being kind of the focus?
I think the only delineation I would make there is that there were comments around trying to understand the relationship between scale and both community support and feasibility, particularly insofar as the relationship between infrastructure and the capacity to, like, the investments that are going to be made. And maybe that was embedded in what you were saying, but just how important those pieces are to actually defining the idea of scale.
I think there's a lot more to get hashed out in terms of what scaling this project looks like. I think just in terms of that differentiation of, are we looking at planning out the whole of Slate Creek neighborhood? I'm hearing, nope, we're working on a first phase with an eye towards the future.
Yeah, and when we talk about planning now, you have some concepts of what you'd like to see on the rest of the property. And I think that's for a fair objective. I don't know what it is, but, when we talk about commercial, when we talk about industrial or whatever we want to talk about out there, do we want to have some concept in mind? If not, to me, a scaled prototype is the way to go because it's faster. And it's more easily implemented.
I think the scale goes to the proof of concept, especially when talking to the community and just saying that, we're gonna entitle this for this commercial, we're gonna do this mix with this amount of houses, and then we're gonna evaluate and we're gonna see, we're not gonna move forward unless we have success into future phases without delineating what those future phases might look like. Also, please flexibility in the design process for future phases.
And a driving force is going to be constraints.
And Tom, does the constraint study just cut off at here's the current constraints out there, or does it include some projections like this is what we'll need in the future?
It will include, yeah, it will include projections.
Okay.
Yeah. It's a little bit, the way we're approaching it is, if you sort of do a stair step in terms of investment in infrastructure, we want to develop something that from that first step, anything beyond that requires significant investment. So it will contemplate that. I don't know if it'll have necessarily the numbers, but it will say, for instance, I'll give you an example. We talked to our streets folk. They're like, we can develop 3.2 miles of roadway. Anything over than that, we need a new public workshop, which is $30 million. So that gives you an example of sort of the instant flip the switch and what we need from an investment standpoint. And it will be very specific.
Emily?
I think there's many benefits to approaching the site holistically. It's just harder. And that's what YBHA learned the first time around. But I do think it's to Tom's point about just understanding those major constraints and triggers for massive investments that would be required. And to Jay's point about right sizing the infrastructure, understanding uses, there really are so many benefits to approaching the site from the big picture holistically, even if that means phasing and annexation, which I would prefer to not have to go through that many times, but that might be the reality. But just sort of understanding the trade-offs between all of the benefits of approaching the site at the site scale, while balancing the sort of challenge of keeping things flexible for whatever may change in the future. And also being able to communicate and articulate that to the community, which is really hard to do.
I just build on Emily's point and say that I think part of the way we're having this conversation right now is maybe, yeah, it could be just a semantic dynamic, but a lot of what I'm hearing you guys talk about is more about a phasing strategy. And what we talked about yesterday was to be careful not to, at the point that people want to start with something that's manageable as a first step is something that I think you guys have landed on. I don't think that's what you're questioning. I think as we explore the meaning of some of these terms like scaled, and we try to figure out what does that mean? I think one implication that is being surfaced is the idea that scaled means sort of a smaller, scaled back version. Another implication is that it should be appropriately scaled to questions around community support, feasibility, fit with community infrastructure. Like, what's that balance? Like, there is a scale that you have to reach so that all these things work. And I guess that's the way I've kind of been interpreting that term. The question of like how much you go for first doesn't necessarily feel like it needs to be embedded in the principle of scale, because scale feels like it should be responsive to those things. And instead, I feel like you guys identified points where you're going to look at these questions of how big and then in what stages, if more stages happen, that you would want to work at in the question of a phasing strategy. And I bring this up partly just to try to carry over conversation from earlier meetings. I'm also trying to always like remember things we talked about in the DST, but also just from a technical perspective on how these things go. I keep kind of looking to Tom and Jay in terms of like, and Emily, you, just like what it is to get these things done. There's differences between understanding a larger site and figuring out like a larger big picture vision and where things are going to go, and then which pieces you can entitle first and the staging of development over time. And so I just would encourage us to make sure what we mean by scale. It feels like we're talking about scale in place of phasing right now. And I just wonder if that's what we're actually meaning by that term.
I would say it's phasing. I think this whole project will be driven by phasing.
Yeah, that's how I understood it from our conversation, like that scale just means phasing it out.
Okay, because the way I had heard us talk about it is actually different. That phasing is a question of the stages of development and like how much, and that scaled was more a question of appropriateness of scale to different factors.
That's how I would interpret it. This scale to me means the size of the project, that it strikes the right balance of meeting needs and being feasible. And then phasing is a separate question to how you eat the elephant. I'm vegetarian.
Jay, did you want to go?
You know, I think when we say scale, we're using an assumption that we're looking at first phase of the project as part of this process to prove that it can work. And, we know there's gonna be constraints on what we come up with. And so a scale project means that we're probably just looking at the first phase here, and then we see what comes down the line. So I think it's a little both, actually.
Well, in that case, I think that's actually bears the point, which is that the concept of scale as a priority and as a principle applies to how you think about phasing, which is to say the first phase needs to be of a scale that we can tackle and wrap our arms around in proof of concept. But also, you guys talked about scale in terms of the questions of community support, like making it not feel like something is out of scale. This came up a lot in the community engagement that's been done in the DST conversations with what our community does, what we're all about. Also, it can't be out of scale with what we can afford, feasibility wise. So I just think that's where, and maybe what I'm trying to avoid you guys doing is hemming yourselves in needlessly when you've created places in your process to define these questions. And so I just personally, I'm sort of hearing that and trying to pull conversations that have already happened in the past maybe and say, you don't necessarily have to put those delineations down if you've already defined a point at which you're going to have an informed conversation that's going to do that for you. I might have the wrong.
Yeah, I tend to think of it more like Jay. I think some of what you described, Clark, is more like what we're talking about when we say feasibility and neighborhood and mixed uses and those things. I think scaled is understanding that there's probably a larger project, but we can only tackle the first.
Got it. Okay.
Little phase. That's how I was.
No, I agree with that.
That's where people are. I think that's the clarification I was looking for.
And the constraints are gonna push this, so it's, in my mind, it's almost a mood issue. We're gonna have only so much we can bite and, you know,
I think we focus on explain to the community what future phases would be without this one big built
You know,
as a vision.
if you get into the practicality of building 200 units or 500 units, we're talking years, 5-6 years to build those. Economics are going to be in the hundreds of millions of dollars to build those. The infrastructure requirements are going to be in the tens of millions, I would guess. So that's a severe constraint on whatever it is we're going to build. And to me, that's phase one is, we can afford it, we can build it in a reasonable amount of time, and we meet some of the need that we have at the table for affordable housing.
Well, and I'm hearing a little bit of blending. So, and I think this is a really important point that we all, are walking away from the table with the same understanding. So I don't know, Clark, do you want to try to maybe reground us in terms of what you've heard?
Well, I worry that maybe I don't want to over color it with my own interpretation of that term. I think what we can say is really clear. What I'm hearing is everybody, I think, is saying that there's an understanding that a first shot at the development that we're talking about has got to be something that is of a modest scale that the community can wrap its arms around, and that this group can wrap their arms around, and that is achievable, right? Because I think there's a concern implied here of well, maybe we went too big last time, let's scale back. We've heard that in a lot of commentary. So I think that's one element that feels like, yeah, everybody could agree with that. I think and maybe I'm hearing a little bit in Emily's comments around sort of the importance of also having a holistic perspective is okay, where do you draw the lines then on planning and at least thinking about how these pieces fit together? Because as has been mentioned, questions around infrastructure and capacity, how are you going to serve this whole thing? It's hard to not look a little bit at a big picture if you were hoping to eventually go there. I could say if this was just being done in the private sector, they would be looking at the big picture and then pulling back to, okay, well, what's the first thing we can tackle? They wouldn't just say, well, we'll figure that out later, because that's pretty risky in terms of the investment you're going to make. A lot of the investment you're going to make in horizontal infrastructure and development is totally contingent upon the possibility of what comes next. Similarly, if you're going to have conversations around parks and trails, are you building that for a 200 unit development? Probably not. So then those questions become less relevant, as opposed to, Same thing with like a mixed use neighborhood concept. You don't go build a 200 unit development and figure out how you're going to integrate a bunch of commercial uses into it. That's just not something that, at least in the private sector, you would do. I mean, maybe in a building, a single individual building, mixed use building, but right. So I just think there's a dynamic here where we're saying yes, the first shot at development entitlements moving forward needs to be a smaller modest scale. How are we looking at, for example, scenario planning? Do you guys want to do? I don't know that even the tool of scenario planning is that useful for, you know, 8 acres or something. It's more useful for understanding a big picture interconnection between how a project like that would unfold. And that might be that you guys are thinking, no, yeah, but even to go to that point right now in a public process, people will freak out if suddenly we're looking at something bigger. I think that's a worthwhile question to ask. And I think you're right, Gail, to sort of say, like, let's not move forward before we make sure we're all on the same page here. Because, part of why I wanted to ask the question when you were getting everybody like, are we good? Is I was like, I was thinking about this dynamic on the drive home. And wondering, like, how aligned are we on this question of what are we really wrapping our arms around? Because it seems like we're in some different spots.
Well, yesterday we had a lengthy discussion on what scenarios are we talking about? Are we talking about a scenario of a small development versus a scenario where you're talking about what could happen over an entire site over the next 25 to 30 years? And we can deal with concepts, I think, for an entire site. We can talk about what the desires are for that site, conceptually. But in my mind, this is just me, I want us to be able to do something and be successful in doing it. And if we are successful in doing it, then we can do it again. I believe that.
Tom, what are you thinking?
I'm thinking what Lou's thinking. I think if we try to master plan this whole site, I push back on Clark a little bit. I think that we can adequately plan the infrastructure for future development without really knowing what's going to be there. I mean, yes, of course, we'd love to know what's going to be there, but we have sort of a parameter of what we know will probably be reasonable, and we can design the infrastructure to accommodate that in the future. Now, you don't want to oversize stuff, but it's possible that we're going to oversize stuff, and that's the nature of the beast. I think if we try to plan this whole thing, it's going to take significantly longer, and we're going to freak the community out, and we're not going to accomplish the goal that we have set out for this group. That's just what I fear.
And so just a clarifying question. So in this phase of planning, we would include thinking through the full build out of infrastructure while focusing on a smaller development.
No, they're saying small.
Just what infrastructure needs would be, and size it correctly under the first.
Okay, so thinking there is a holistic thought about infrastructure with a focus on a feasible short term.
Yeah, the way I'm understanding it is the like trunk infrastructure to serve the future neighborhoods would be sized for a larger development. But we wouldn't build out the infrastructure to serve anything beyond a first phase.
And in many respects, we've already done that, right? Gossard Parkway is already a roadway that's, planned for future growth. We're putting in a water line this summer that's already planned for future growth with the entire development. So in many respects, we're already making progress on accomplishing that. We need to do that and focus just on the first phase.
And we're going underground. That would be, we should put a sewer sleeve in there.
Yeah, that's what we're doing.
Yeah, actually wastewater.
Wastewater is not an issue.
Well, the pedestrian connections, you're just starting.
Yeah, I think we're on the same page. I've been quiet throughout this, but I am aligned with what was just stated about yes, we're gonna look at the parcel from a holistic approach, but we're really only addressing the infrastructure for whatever we deem is appropriate for phase one, understanding that what we put in there, just making sure, like Emily said, it is appropriate so that we can build upon it for the future.
But for clarity, I think people are saying we're not going to look at the parcel from a larger holistic approach.
Well, I think we're not gonna develop it, to Tom's point. We know that we want something. We know that, like, yeah, eventually we would love to see commercial and this and parks and trails, but we're not like committing to any of that. We are just saying that whatever we do for phase one needs to eventually fit into a larger plan. We don't want to build phase one and then be like, oh, we've boxed ourselves in, as Jay said. So we're not planning out, but we are just having that in our mind of, yeah, this is the vision we'd eventually like to see, but we're not like committing to X amount of acres are gonna be commercial, X amount are gonna be this. We just know that whatever we do for phase one has to give us the flexibility to do other things.
The properties that were already mapped out and designed, right, for the original Brown Range project, probably the best pathways through the property. And that probably wouldn't change as the development grows. Or it would change very little because they're probably the best identified pathways already.
Gail?
Well, and I was gonna say, I think kind of back to the comment, I mean, this is where it's gonna get difficult, right? I mean, or again, maybe you guys can help me understand a little bit better when we start talking about right, the water, the electricity, right, or the energy. To me, those are where I was alluding to earlier, where I think there's gonna need to be decisions made, right? In the sense of, in some, in a lot of instances, it's gonna make more sense, right? Like as Tom was mentioning, we've got the larger water line going in now, but when we start talking about building something that's gonna support a smaller neighborhood versus the entire parcel, that's where there's gonna be the trade-offs. And so I'm struggling because I hear and agree, right, from the perspective of starting and kind of whatever the word, right, if we want to say proof of concept and something that the community is going to support. But we know then that that's potentially going to increase the cost later down the road if we don't put in, kind of the proper amount of infrastructure. But if I'm wrong on that, please help me understand this better.
I think there's two ways to look at it, then, Tom. Look to you as when you build infrastructure, you need to be conscious of, essentially the unit cost associated with that. If we build out full infrastructure for this property and then put that cost burden on 200 units, nobody's going to be able to afford the units. That's just the way it is. And so everything has to be done in that phased approach. And that, to me, that's what phasing is.
I think there's another end of that too, that you don't want to put infrastructure in which is going to be used.
Exactly.
Like a paved road fails really quickly if it's not driven. Just for the.
No, you can put in water lines that are sized, and yes, Gail's right, it'll be more expensive now. But I think it would be a whole lot more expensive to go in and replace it if we plan to build. So some of the major stuff, water, sewer, some of the probably will have to be a little bit oversized now to accommodate the future growth. But I don't think, Gail, I don't think it's going to be significantly. It's not going to make the project infeasible, I don't think.
I'm gonna get us here a little bit and have us play this out as we describe our statement of our vision. And then we can see it visually as well and see the ways that folks are describing scaled in practice to be able to know, okay, I think we're circling closer and closer to our target of what exactly we mean by this. I know at this point for sure, this group is not coming up with a master plan, right? We know like that's not what's happening. The degree of what we're talking about of a first phased approach, I think is what we're articulating here. And I'm gonna pop us into our next Menti question, which is getting us into thinking about the role this group is playing. And I'm gonna have you just start off, I'm gonna box you into one word. I think you might be able to submit multiple times. You're gonna fill in the blank. Together we will, what's our primary role? Are we stewarding? Are we designing? Are we collaborating? Are we planning, implementing?
Steering.
Path is more than one.
What?
Charting path is more than one.
It is.
That's what hyphens are for.
No.
Hopefully a true plan.
Is it letting you put in multiple words if you wanted to? Okay. You can do that. But like there's multiple.
Yes, we. Say that, yes, I want this word. Can I add something to that last conversation we had? To Gail's point, I think that, that needs to be a significant part of our public outreach, is the confirmation from the community that a larger project. Right, because there's a million different reasons why that project was voted down. But maybe it was voted down because people don't want that much growth. They're okay with 200 units or 300 units or whatever we come up with. But if we get through the process and they're like, this is it. We don't want this whole area developed. I think we need to know that. So we're making the assumption that, yes, we're planning this for a larger project in the next 20 to 25 years. But I think we need to confirm that.
Yeah, that's what I'm struggling with too, is like the community dynamics aspect of like, oh, we think that the community wants like a smaller scale project right now, or like, you know, whatever it may be, but I don't know that we've actually asked them like what it is that they want, what their vision is for this like parcel of land, and like what they want out of this future. And I know that like the DST did some of that work, but I'm wondering if we could ask them to like prototype a vision or like something like that to get a better idea of like what they want.
I have a question on what Tom said of like, and this is for the group, not just for you, but like you said, what if the community doesn't want that much growth? Just from an economic perspective, growth is coming. Like you have the projections for how many people are gonna be living here and working here and the businesses. We've got the Yampa Valley Regional Airport expansion. We've got Hayden doing this business park. We've got, you know, so to a certain extent, the community might not want growth, but growth is coming,
It doesn't have to come from the city of Steamboat.
whether they want it or not. No, I hear what you're saying, and you have the urban growth boundary, and that is where growth is designated to. And so, you know, my question is, Steamboat is the economic hub of the county right now, right? It's where the jobs are, it's where this is, and so whether you want it or not.
Sorry.
It's not me, it's not.
Oh, it's me,
Growth
my
is
bad.
coming to Steamboat Springs, like you can't shut the doors.
You can't.
You can't, you can't.
Well, you can. I mean,
You think
can
like,
from a growth management standpoint, we can say we're shrinking the urban growth boundary. And any growth that's going to occur is going to occur in Hayden, Craig, and Stagecoach and Oak Creek, and we're not going to develop there. I mean, that is a value statement that the community could make. I'm not saying that is.
Well,
What-
Boulder's approach, though, to be clear, was included a meaningful investment in infrastructure and rail systems and significant levels of infill. So I think the narrative that they like turned off, now Aspen largely did. So that's almost a better example. Outside of large, expensive homes, they made it really hard to build anything. So I think Aspen, Pitkin County is a better example than Boulder, probably.
Right, my question to the group was like, I don't think we need to get into the details of like, does Steamboat Springs want to close the doors or not? Like, that's not my decision or, to make or to argue right now. My question for the larger group is just, even if the community, and which community are we talking about? Like, I think that gets into like the weeds, says, we don't want growth, but growth is coming. Do we have a responsibility to steward that growth and to shepherd it and to like narrow it down into areas that are already designated for growth and to make sure that, that growth is properly managed through destination stewardship or through these things. And so I think there's always, there's like the group of people who never want growth. There's a group of people who only want growth if it fits their vision. There's a group of people who are pro-growth, right? Like, so there's levels to that growth as well. And so I guess my just question to the group would be like, do we have a responsibility to steward that growth or to navigate it and to shepherd it into the way that we think best fits our community character? Or is this group to just say like, well, the community doesn't want growth and so we're not doing it, even though we know it's coming? Yeah, I think we've seen historically a lot of communities who say we don't want the growth and don't steward it or shepherd it, see it arise in ways that are not beneficial to the community. They see it overfill or they see it combust because we're trying to keep it so tight. So anyway, that's my question is, what is our responsibility?
I might bring it back out of growth and bring it back to affordability and be like, this is our best place to build an affordable neighborhood. Regardless of what people want for growth, and it's been designated, it's been donated. It's been identified, and I don't think the community is gonna rail against it at all. I don't believe 200 or 300.
I don't either.
Quick, I saw Emily's hand up a bit ago, so I want to go to her next. Yes.
I was just gonna say that I don't believe that we should be asking the community in 2026, whether the community in 20 years from now is going to want to grow. But yeah, I'll just leave it at that.
We sort of did confirm it already. My point is, we're making some assumptions as this small group. I think that we should just be clear.
Absolutely.
What we're talking about.
I look at it just a little differently. I do think we are responsible. Government, my view of government is it is responsible for the future, period. That's the role of government. And yeah, it's my definition. But in terms of growth, I'd say maybe 30% of the population in this town does not want to grow at all. They don't want any kind of growth. They don't want the growth in the urban growth boundary. And honestly, if you told people that, the projection is 20,400 people by 2040 in the urban growth boundary or in the city itself, they'd go batshit. They would. So, and the resistance to Brown Ranch was they're going to be 10,000 people out there. They're going to be 4,500 people. How many of those were actually new people? How many of those were, actually new growth? There's all kinds of fuzzy numbers. But, at what rate is the community going to say, no, I don't want that? Do we need to do a survey? I think we should have a survey that says, would you be looking at a development that says there's going to be an additional 4,000 people?
I don't think we should. I think we already got that survey. It was voted down 58%.
No, maybe that's because some people voted for 10,000 people, but it's a different story.
Quick, I see
So far.
Gail's hand up, so I gotta go Gail and then we'll go Jay.
Thank you. It is, I mean, to me, and that's why I chose the word stewardship or steward, right? I mean, to me, it is about our role as stewards, and stewards to the communities, stewards of the land, stewards of, how we move forward and how we balance what we're hearing from the community in the sense of, yes, there's lots of people who don't want growth. There's people who are concerned about our small town culture. There's people who are, on the opposite side. We don't want growth, but we don't like traffic, right? But we need the workforce to be able to support our community, and make it livable as well as financially stable. So it's about balancing all of those interests, and it's our and I believe it is our responsibility also to look forward in terms of what do we see and how do we make sure that we are putting in place an infrastructure which is not just roads, but also it's kind of the people, the human capital, to make sure that we have a functioning community. So I think we've got to, look at all of that. And again, I'm a broken record. It's about community engagement. It's about, talking, with the community and going back to the trade-offs that, as we're making these decisions, these are the trade-offs that we need to think about, whether it's, impact on traffic, whether it's impact on finances, kind of the financial aspect of what we need in order to move forward.
I was just gonna say that if we're looking at, the constraint study, what can be built out there, we're probably looking at a 5 to 10 year build out. It's not a bad thing to land bank. The biggest problem the county has, the city in certain ways, why you have to acquire property down along the core trail, is that we haven't land banked property. The county took an active position like, oh, we want everything on the tax rolls. Now we're out buying property for gravel pits and airport expansions and that type of thing. Like, if we can focus on what this scaled project is and look at the balance of the site, that part within the urban growth boundary, not outside, is land banking for future community discussions on the appropriate growth. I think we have a path forward as opposed to getting bogged down on these bigger questions. And in all reality, the debate on growth is going to be so much different in 15 years than it is right now, because different development patterns, where employees, how the rest of the region builds out. So keep it simple. Sorry, didn't mean to get on the soapbox.
No, I agree.
From this conversation, what are the implications for what we need to include in our purpose statement? Is this around how we're defining a scaled approach?
It's kind of interesting. Everything we're talking about kind of goes back to the green on the wall, and it's really just, does the sequencing of that change what we put together at our last group of meetings? But the info's all there. Just
I'll just add one more thing that I don't think is there. I don't know whether we want to talk about it as a group, is timing.
I think we have to talk about time.
Whether that's part of our responsibility or our charge or our purpose is to add an element of timing to this.
Yeah, I mean, I think there has to be a certain sense of urgency. We have a demand report. Demand report says, well, there are only 2,000 plus units behind that today. Number isn't going to go down if we do nothing. So moving quickly makes the number go down, hopefully faster.
Maybe setting aside like the, one side or the other of how fast or not. I think you're saying like, we need to back into timing, which I know we want to do in the context of this process. But I think we will also then want to look at least in a, high level perspective, like what are we thinking about in terms of timing? There's a lot of things to consider right now on that front, including the availability of resources for building this kind of thing right now. It's about as bad as ever. And also financing is kind of unique at the moment. So timing is, we can want to go fast and also spend a lot more local non-leveraged dollars if you do. But I think if you back into a bigger picture, sort of evaluation of like, what are we realistically looking at, especially, smaller scale size wise, And again, I think you guys are further along than you realize in terms of like agreement on something small, but then what does it take to actually understand how that fits and what the right, I think timing will be a key piece, yeah.
Pick an annexation vote date and work your way backwards.
Well, I know the community's gonna be asking, right? We said we have a sort of a common statement that we're all working from. We're gonna make that statement, and the next question everyone's gonna ask is when?
Do we want to add that as maybe in the governance and decision making as a purple here, determine timeline? As a piece of setting that kind of parameter?
Like a full project timeline, not just a process timeline. And I think to the question of, I mean, I could be wrong. There's a lot of people who know more about this stuff than me in the room, but if people say, when are we going to go to the ballot? My personal response, if I was in a decision-making role here, is we'll know more about that when we talk to the community and figure out details. But it's just to sort of back yourselves into that right now feels challenging. And I feel like it puts you guys in the same situation you guys were in before, where you had to work under this really constrained, difficult timeline that created a lot of the dynamics you guys have. What's the language you want on the timing? Oh, develop full project timeline.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of assumed as we worked on that roadmap, it would have the time.
But this is helpful for just getting kind of explicit about some of these things, so we don't like leave them to chance, right? That's part of our purview, that's what we're doing. Okay, I'm gonna have us return to the questions that are up, or the words that are up here. We've got some that are bigger that might have multiple folks who have put those up there. But I'd love to just get a quick version of kind of what's the story behind these that people are putting up here. And then we're going to get into combining both of these pieces of what's our role and where are we headed into a purpose statement.
I can start off. I was the first one who broke the rules and put chart of path.
I did as well.
Then follow suit. I was thinking about yesterday how a lot of the conversation was like, our goal is to create this roadmap. And, I think what the community, to Tom's actual point that he just made, is like, the community wants to know, what's the timeline? What's the process? What is this? And so to me, like, we are really creating a path forward that answers a lot of those questions. We're creating a path forward when it comes to an eventual annexation vote, if and when. We're creating a path forward when it comes to feasibility. We're creating a path forward when it comes to our shared priorities. Like, I think what I hear a lot of is just questions like, well, what's happening? What's the process? When are we going to get stuff built out there? How big is it going to be? And for us, we just need to create that path so that these other things can start to unfold and we can really start to dig into those things. And so that's why I put that in there, is really feeding off of the roadmap conversation from yesterday and answering a lot of the unanswered questions that not only we have in this room, but that community members have as well.
Other stories that are up there.
But explaining and selling, because since being on city council, I've had to, talk to a bunch of the people that supported me and defend different areas that we had misnomers about. And so going back through this whole process and being part of that vote no for Brown Ranch, knowing how to explain and to sell to those people what this new project is going to be, why it's a benefit to them. So I think that's a portion of the community that, was, I don't want to say underserved, but underinformed, underserved, however, or had an opinion already predetermined. So that's one of my biggest things with this, is to be able to be behind it and go to those people and explain to them why it's necessary and why it's good for the community. So explain to themselves.
Put steward on there because I think I think of that as sort of, it's both it's charting the path, it's dividing the path forward, but then also making sure that we're following it and being accountable to ourselves, the organizations that make up this group, but then also accountable to the community. Because throughout this process that we've laid out, there's going to be different organizations who take the lead in this. And so then, coming together, this governance group, we'd be holding each other accountable. But that's sort of the best word to make sure that we're following the path, creating the sort of engagement plan, actioning that plan. I thought that was a good kind of overall description of what I see this group doing.
Yeah, similarly, I did create and create like similar to what Angelica was saying, is that we're creating a path forward and a roadmap for the future. And then collaborate is, I think the intention behind creating this group in the first place was to bring all these organizations together and kind of what Emily was saying too, like understanding where each organization fits, what strengths each one brings, and like how we can work all those together into creating this roadmap forward.
Are there any of these words up here that give you heartburn? Like, gosh, I don't know if that's our.
I think they almost all say the same thing in a different approach, to be honest. I totally agree with Emily's. When she put out there, I put Steward too, and I think it also acknowledges that none of us, except maybe those with the housing authority, are the actual developers of the property. So it's great for us to put our input in it, but I think we just have to work together to move it forward because we're not going to actually be doing the work. Theoretically.
For collaborating, it might be.
Yeah.
I like all of the words up there. I don't
Yeah,
have heartburn with any of them.
All right, so then now we're gonna pull all of these pieces together. And I'm gonna have you go ahead and draft a purpose statement for the Slate Creek Steering Committee. This is where you may actually be able to submit multiple if you want to play with a couple variations or whatnot. At the end of this, I'll give you a chance to vote on one another's to pick kind of what are your top ones. But as you think about this, combine the different elements we've talked about, right? So what's our central role and purpose? Our relationship to a place, Lake Creek neighborhood, the product we're putting forth as a result of this, a path, a roadmap, a da-da-da. And what are the central tenets that we are focused on? As we thought about those rankings, those kind of green pieces, what do we need to articulate to the community that we're going to be focused on as we collaborate, steward, blank?
You have a computer, you can join via menti.com and they may make your typing easier. You don't know how many words you have. Tips and tricks.
That's what.
Me, you're ready.
There's a limit on how many.
What do you hit?
Lou, I can't believe that from you, buddy.
No, I'm not.
Okay.
I'm with the lemon game.
Characters.
Yeah, I submitted, it, and then I was okay, continue.
Misled.
I
Thank you.
support. How long does it give you?
No, I like it. I like that it's tight. It makes it fun.
Yes,
Like,
yeah.
it can't ramble. You just need to dig in. Do it.
Yeah, it's like.
Take out a word.
One less collaboration. Don't use that.
Did it make you re-sign in every time you wanted to?
I don't know.
Oh, okay. I think if you go back to your browser, it should still be there. Whenever you. Well, it's too late now, but.
I can do it.
Instead of like, is it real?
So.
No, you're going to see each other.
So 3.
Okay.
Going up. Cut it down. That's actually. Yeah, it just shows up like.
4, 12.
Oh, got it.
Gail, have you completed yours? Yes. Anybody still working? Or I want to double check that you submitted because I'm only seeing 7.
Pretty sure mine's.
Okay, I'm gonna show results and you can see if yours is missing.
Oh, okay.
It's the lowest one, Kale, that we can't
What
see.
is that?
Oh, mine's not. Oh, no, mine's there.
Mine's not there.
Yours is.
No, 3 of yours are there?
I put, I said 3.
Oh, no.
Now you just have to.
Can I see your screen?
Certainly.
You blew past the word limit.
See, you would let me. Like more than 10 words.
It's,
Stopped.
And you hit submit.
Yeah, and I did some.
Yeah.
It's kind of funny, a lot of them just all say very similar things, just with using different terminology.
Okay.
There we go.
So now just type it out.
Oh, now I have to type it out.
Yeah.
Okay.
We're just like stuck on the limit.
And if you have this open on your device, you should be able to see them there too. That's helpful, but I'll keep scrolling through these. Give Lou a minute. Yes.
Okay.
Okay. So now you should be able to go through these and start voting. If you return back to your device, you can look at what are your, I believe I gave you top three statements that you like. And it won't allow you to put 3 votes on one. You have to choose different ones.
The general rules that you can't vote for yourself. Just kidding.
No, I didn't set that up, so if you're like, looking at all these, I'm still.
but if it's perfectly spread enough, 8 votes, 1 each.
The girls on my soccer team vote for captains the other day and everybody's name appeared at least once. Cause they got 2 votes. So
I'm a fan of that. You gotta advocate for yourself.
okay, I told the girls, they're like, "Can you vote for us?" I was like, heck yeah. Yeah.
I'm, listen,
Out on a
if
beat.
you're not gonna advocate for you, who is?
So I told them.
We get 3 votes. If we really, really like, only like, I mean, I like them all, but if we like 2 are just like so far ahead of the others, can I only vote twice?
No,
You want me to do the 3rd one?
Oh, yeah, you can abstain from a vote.
Okay.
Sure. Mhm. I thought you were asking if you could vote for something.
Oh, no, yeah, okay.
Everybody need coffee?
You tell if
I can see that 3 people have voted.
okay,
And let me see your screen. Just
it's talking, voting results not shared yet.
okay, then you're good.
Okay.
One of the funkiest kiwis I've ever tasted.
Is that a good thing, guys?
I think so.
Skills and grades, that's what I'm doing.
Slate Creek neighborhood special.
Here.
Those are last year's.
Hey, Kale, can you, sorry, apologies, I had to step away for a quick break. Can you show me what we're voting on?
Oh, yeah, so if you go back to your Mentimeter where you had it open, it should allow you now to vote on the different statements.
Okay, thank you.
And you get 3 votes and you can't vote on the same thing twice.
That sounds fair. Okay, thank you.
Do I have one person other than Gail still voting?
Me.
Great, okay, I just wanna make sure everything, so that means Lou, you were counted.
Was counted.
Great.
So much better.
Validated?
Validated. Being a Luddite is so hard.
You just got.
I did.
Okay.
That's what we do now.
Okay,
It's very clear.
you need me to make you a co-host again? Go ahead and review our top ones. Okay, and then what I wanna do once Tom comes back is I wanna take a temperature check consensus vote to see if the one that has the most votes right now feels like something we can move forward with it. You're gonna give me less than a 2 if you feel like we need to revise it a little bit before going forward, but I just wanna see how close are we on this. But we'll wait for Tom for just a second. The other thing I'll say while we're waiting for Tom is that just to like make a little bit of this whole process transparent, you might be like, okay, wait, we started on this whole process of the roadmap and this stuff last meeting. Feels like we're doing it again in some ways, and that can feel frustrating of like, are we making enough progress quick enough? And I want to show you just real quick, anytime we're working with groups and trying to make group decisions, when you're making decisions alone, it's a straight line. You can go from your problem to your decision real quick. But with groups, we go through this first phase of brainstorming, of getting everything out on the table and introducing all the different possibilities. But then we get to a place called the groan zone, where we have too many possibilities. And that's a little bit of almost where we were in the conversation about a scaled approach, is we start to feel that feeling of going around in circles, but we're getting closer to something, right? When we start doing polling like this, we start going into the phase where we're narrowing and closing in on something. So I just like to give you a roadmap of all the uncomfortable feelings you have while collaborating with folks, right? Because it can be really annoying, but we have to go through those 3 phases again and again with each decision we're making. And we're getting there, and now we're getting.
Where does the uncomfortable kiwi show up?
The process.
It's gotta be on the bottom somewhere.
An implied point, but it's worth stating out loud, is that in that divergent thinking where it's widening out, the thing about that is that's where creativity happens and like different ideas come together. And so as frustrating as it can be when you're out there, it is also a sign that we're sort of finding we're pushing out on the boundaries of sort of what those things are. And you're sort of finding, okay, I think I found a wall over here and I think I found a wall over here. And it makes it a lot easier to then do the convergent thinking that brings things back together. You don't necessarily feel so great about bringing things back together when you feel like a lot of territory was left unexplored. So.
All right, so now, Tom, we're gonna do like a temperature check consensus vote on the one that got our most votes. To say, on this to 5, how comfortable are you moving forward with this as our purpose statement? feel like it still needs revision, you're gonna give me less than a 3. You're gonna say, I think it needs some work. Go ahead and give me your vote on 1, 2, 3. Okay, we got some 2s. All right, what do we need to shift?
I'll start off. To be fair, I voted for options 1 and 2, so those are my top 2. But I just think it reads clunky. Like I think it's a little too wordy and it's clunky to say we will steward a roadmap. Like I almost think the second option reads clearer. So I honestly just think for me, my 2 vote was just a wordsmithing thing. These were my top 2 choices. I just think it reads clunky.
I mean, I think the words that are missing and that need to mix and match is the feasibility is, to me, an important word. And it's not in the second statement.
Yeah, no, so I'm just sitting here thinking through this, and maybe this is just because I come from a communications background, like that's my background is I think together we will create a path for Slate Creek neighborhood reads clearer than the first line of the other one. And then by delivering homes our neighbors can afford, I love the neighbors aspect of it. Like that seems really wholesome to me with the affordability piece, but then we could put like while honoring, or while prioritizing feasibility and honoring, community engagement, stewardship, and public trust. Like to me, that's like a little clearer because I think what's missing is the feasibility and community engagement.
Yeah.
So together we will create a path for Slate Creek neighborhood by delivering homes our neighbors can afford while prioritizing feasibility and honoring community engagement, stewardship, and public trust.
Yeah, Jay.
I think we also need somewhere in there to acknowledge that the public votes on this. So we're just putting the roadmap, but the end point is the vote. So I just think if the public outside is looking in, then we need to acknowledge that. That's just my.
That almost brings in a little bit of that. The third outlines specific steps in the plan for the annexation, but you're saying in particular, we need to then present a vote to the public.
But is that like the purpose statement of this group? Because we can't force like city council to refer something to the ballot or something.
Annexation's fine.
Gail?
Isn't feasibility part of it?
Well, and that, I think to Jay's point, I got a little bit hung up on the word community engagement and was thinking more community support. I don't know, Jay, I don't know if that isn't to say enough, right? And it needs to be community supported. I mean, do we need to, say that there's an annexation? But I do think as opposed to engagement, it's support. So again, while prioritizing, following up, not quite in terms of blending the 2, 7, and 6, right? Or the 7 and the 6 votes.
Anyone who hasn't spoken yet, though, I see something we need to fix in here. Yeah, Dave and then Tom.
I think somewhere we need to emphasize, I know we say Slate Creek neighborhood, but we need to emphasize the neighborhood aspect of it. I struggle with improves affordability and creates housing. So to me, what we're doing is we're just doing housing development. And I think that was one of the fundamental flaws of the original design. I know there was a small amount of commercial, but this has to be a neighborhood with a mix of uses. And if we go to the community and say, we're doing just housing, it's not gonna pass.
Disagree.
So what are you proposing to say?
I think we somehow have to emphasize one of our priorities, which is neighborhood or mixed uses. So people know that it's more than just housing.
Something that benefits the whole community. I think that was the component that was really left out of the first one. And in fact, people saw it as a lot of negative impacts for the whole community, other than the stakeholders that were going to live in the community, live in Broad Range. And so whether it's a commercial, I look at everything that's going on in the landscape and people are constantly talking about their taxes going up 20, 30, 40%. We're proposing new taxes all the time. There's nothing about fiscal responsibility in this statement either. The hangover of how much this was going to cost all the stakeholders in the city in the first go around with, I think, some sort of fiscal responsibility, but also the commercial, and the commercial helps offset that and also provides a community benefit. Provides a benefit to somebody who lives on the mountain, if it reduces traffic trips through town. It provides benefit to commuters that are going to Hayden and Craig, so I think having that in the statement would also be important. Not stuck on it, but I think it somehow it needs to be addressed.
My question to the group, sorry, Gail, did you want
You go.
would just be, is this statement more process focused or vision focused? Because I think we could do both. Like, I thought that this was like a large purpose statement, and then under our purpose statement, we can have these like process, I don't want to call them goals, but like targets or pillars, you know, under the large purpose statement. Otherwise, I think the purpose statement gets so fluffy and we're including all of these like in the weeds things. So maybe that's just like something that we could come to consensus on here is like, is this purpose statement more of an overarching statement? And then we have like pillars underneath that address some of these like in the weeds details, because I think the longer and larger you make a purpose statement, then the more like convoluted it can get or the more wordy it can get. And if we are going out to the community to say, this is our purpose, and here's how we're going to do it through these pillars, through these 3 pillars of community engagement, or these communities through these pillars of fiscal responsibility, through these pillars, like to me, that's a better process from a communication standpoint and just than trying to create a purpose statement where it's like comma, and this, and this, and this, and this.
Yeah, I mean, if that's the case, then I would advocate that we say we will steward or create a path for the Slate Creek neighborhood that prioritizes feasibility and community support.
Yeah, I think the community support part covers a lot of
Make it really simple.
that's underneath it, yeah.
If we're simplifying it that much, I would request that we prioritize affordability, feasibility, community support.
Yeah, I like that.
That gets to your top 3 or your top rankings to have all of those included.
So just to summarize what I heard, together we will create a path for the Slate Creek neighborhood, and prioritize affordability, feasibility, and community support.
Right. That sounds pretty good.
And under that purpose statement, we have these, I'm using the word pillars, I'm not attached to that, but we have these pillars of like, to accomplish this, we are going to be fiscally responsible. We are going to have like mixed use or create a neighborhood. We're going to do, you know what I mean? Just like is easier for us to tell our story.
What are your thoughts on that, Tom?
And keep it really simple.
But also I could be 100% wrong and you guys could say that's not enough and open to that.
No, I think you're right. I think we need like a shorter vision statement that's like easy to say, easy to communicate, and then we can talk a little bit more about details and like pillars, like you were saying, if, you know, describing further.
Yeah, I would support that too. I'm a little bit hesitant to get rid of if I heard it correctly, the homes for our neighbors. I mean, I think that's a kind of a key point. So maybe, and it might, I don't know if somebody can kind of type up.
I have it written down here. So it would be, together we'll create a path for Slate Creek neighborhood by delivering homes for our neighbors and prioritizing community support, feasibility, and affordability.
So I'm gonna just to
Just
capture.
devil's advocate, then don't our neighbors already have homes if there aren't neighbors?
Not ownership opportunities, right? A lot of our neighbors are renters. A lot of our neighbors are paying.
I understand that, it's just the semantics of it.
Yeah, no, I hear you. No, I think scratch the can afford part because we're going to prioritize affordability, delivering homes for our neighbors, prioritizing affordability, feasibility, and community support.
On the point of neighbors, do you guys want to just say community overall to imply breadth of
Yeah.
that, and then recognizing that then that doubles community up? You could say broad-based support.
People don't understand what you mean. Not to nitpick, it's a nit.
Yeah, I was gonna, I like that suggestion.
All right, let's go ahead and give me your fist of 5 on this statement, knowing it would come with some additional language around the different pillars that will be balancing as we look at the design of the space. Go ahead and give me your fist of 5 on 1, 2, 3. All right, it's good. Okay, so we've got a purpose statement. I'm going to, when we think about those additional pillars, I go back to do we need, is it beyond this list?
I'm not gonna necessarily name stuff that I think, like right off the bat, but I do think that there's probably more here.
More colors?
Well, it doesn't touch on timeliness. Which we- Timing.
Yes.
I could be convinced either way. I think that like the pillars I heard just from that conversation and I took notes on was like fiscal responsibility should be like the pillar. Mixed use or neighborhood, something, I don't know how to wordsmith that yet, should be a pillar. And then we added community engagement, so that was the other one.
On affordability. Just to leverage the dialogue that's happened so far, reaching actually back to the DST, they landed on actually 3 pillars, which you could add a 4th to, but so much of this is nesting, like it's the Russian nesting dolls, right? Their pillars were affordability, which got into the questions of like, this thing does need to advance affordability. That's its, original intended purpose. Feasibility, talk about that. And place, which got at the idea, like we want it to be a neighborhood, a good design, it needs to, it needs to be something that I think somebody said really well. Like we want it to be a place our community is proud of. And then I think the 4th pillar that you guys are talking about in that context, I'm not suggesting a whole reordering here, but would be community support. And if you were to look at things that way and err on the side of simplicity, a lot of your priorities actually can nest under some of those. So there's ways you can, homes for our community and affordability do actually nest together. Mix of uses feeds into a couple of those pieces, actually, probably certainly into place, but also into potentially feasibility. I'm not suggesting you go another way. I'm just simply saying that there has been dialogue, people who have thought through this stuff and landed in a pretty related place that was slightly more trim, which doesn't necessarily mean it's better.
In the last attempt, with Brown Ranch, the pillars were, well, I guess one of the pillars that we did have that's missing here is sustainability. And I know that a lot of community members really supported that, and I imagine that some didn't. So I don't know if we need to have a broader conversation about what sustainability means, but I think we just need to acknowledge that the built environment is the greatest, sort of contributor to our carbon emissions in the community. And when we're talking about building out a new neighborhood, that we need to take that into mind. So I don't know if that's one of the actual pillars that go around, but I guess I just wanted to put that out there for discussion.
Yeah, I mean, I think sustainability, it's a good catchphrase, but it has good meaning. I, a little disappointed, Sustainability Council is now the Resilience Council, which doesn't have as much meaning to me, but sustainability is key. You know,
I would suggest our code already provide for that sustainability. You know, to try and make that a pillar for community support adds another layer of complexity. We're going through all these sustainability changes right now with irrigation plans, with fire sustainability. So I think trying to add that into our focus seems like it might be tough.
There's a lot of, everything you guys are working on is already being done somewhere. You guys have everything you're talking about is already in your codes, your policies, your comp plan. So some of you guys are doing communications and making sure they're clear.
Yeah, so maybe the question, Dave, is the sustainability make those saleable?
No, it makes it more, makes it more affordable.
Okay, well,
And if you're gonna have additional measures above code, then I think it would add a layer of additional expense.
so you think that's your perception, yes.
And that's something we can get into with the scenario planning.
Yeah.
That's a good way to look at it. Is one way to look at these things is what are the buckets, the themes you would want to evaluate within the context of scenario planning. If you're pretty sure that some people are going to want to look at questions of, you know, that relate to any topic, like that's a good one. It doesn't have to be, but that's another way to think about it.
Yeah, I mean, we're gonna look at geothermal energy.
Well, I mean, as it is tough right now, right? I mean, if you put houses close together within, 10 feet, you're gonna have no landscaping between houses. Under this new code, or if there's gonna be a certain type of low growth, sustainable bush that you can plant in there, so it's all good, you're not gonna have trees because they're being too close to the canopies of the roof, and so there's a lot of those things that are going through already that are gonna dictate. So, I mean, I don't know, maybe you have different ideas of what the sustainable will be, whether it be a solar component or.
I think, well, go ahead.
No, you go.
I was just gonna say to summarize it at a very high level, the simplest way would be alignment with our local climate action plan.
You guys, does like the long-term viability of the project fit into that, or do you guys think of sustainability purely on like environmental terms?
Well, I look at it on long-term viability. Sustainable and repeatable. I think that's another word.
Gail, I'm gonna have you jump in here and then I'm actually gonna do a pin in this conversation. And I'll do that in just a second, but Gail, you get in and then.
Okay, yeah, thank you. I just appreciate Emily bringing that up because that was something that I've been thinking about. And I do think in terms of the addition of the word sustainability and sustainability kind of certainly in the broad sense. And, to the point, we also have the word affordability, we have the word feasibility, and certainly, it's a balance, right? In the sense of some of the when we talk about sustainability, it's transportation, it is being good stewards of the land and thinking about future impacts and how do we make sure that we not mitigate as well as create resilience as we're thinking about this neighborhood and potentially, what we're going to be facing in the next, 5 to 10 years. So, I mean, I would advocate for the addition of the word sustainability. Because it can, because it can be, broadly interpreted, making sure that we have a sustainable community.
Okay, so with this conversation, what I'm going to advocate that we do here is we're going to take all of these pieces that we've been discussing and have our team / comms team do a first pass at this that would outline these different things that we've heard from you all so far are the additional considerations of like what needs to be included with the purpose statement and bring it back to you for next meeting. And then we can fine tune these pieces of what to include, what not to include at this level. But I think we've got the core kind of elements here to move forward at like the high level. And then some of this is getting into what does the community prioritize in these things as well. And then I'm doing this because I want to get us into community engagement, because this next section is basically you all giving advice that we can hand over to comms team to develop a menu of options for you. So I want to get to that piece. Does that feel okay? Okay. And flip back to our slideshow. Okay. So I mentioned this briefly at the start earlier, but we're going to kind of separate out the conversation between communications and community engagement, where communications is what we talked about with the selling, with the transparent communication, that we're making sure that folks stay informed about what this group is doing, what's happening, what's getting planned, all that kind of stuff. Anything that would be community engagement is when we ask for something back in addition to that. So if we're asking for advice, if we're taking it to a vote, that's all going to be at the layer there. When we talked with comms teams before, all of our brainstorm was all kind of all in one category together. And we want to separate these out so that we can clearly articulate what we want for each. I'm going to kind of come back to the next two slides where we're going to have a conversation about like what we've heard from you so far is that in terms of communications, we want it to be transparent, accessible, frequent, and persuasive. I want to have a discussion about what this would look like in practice, and then a discussion about what community engagement could look like in practice. But we've been sitting and talking kind of as a large group for a while, so I want to just kind of switch us up for a second. And we're going to do an activity with a couple of different tensions that we've heard come up in our approach to community engagement that I want us to explore. And Gail, this is where I have to apologize to you because I'm going to break us up into groups and it's going to be a little harder for you to participate for this next little bit. But I tried to create the Mentimeter so it was easier for you to participate on some of this. So hopefully you'll forgive me. Okay. Okay, so we're going to do something called polarity mapping. Polarity mapping is where we take two things that are generally valuable and we look at how do we get the best out of those things and when do we find to get the worst out of those things. So when I've heard us get through some of these tensions, it can be like community engagement versus maybe like a communication strategy or something like that. And I don't want to create that like where we have to choose one or the other. So we're going to do polarity mapping. So the easy example is breathing is balancing two poles, right? If you just inhale, you're going to get too much carbon dioxide, but the best of it is you get fresh oxygen. The opposite side, if you just exhale, you're going to run out of oxygen, right? But we need to get a balance of those two things. So as we go through this, we're going to put the top things are the positive results of focusing on that pole. And on the bottom is our fear. What are the negative results of over-focusing on a given pole? So an example of this that's a little bit more concrete, that's not breathing, is going to be unity and diversity. So the best of the diversity is that different innovation. It values each individual perspective. It might provide greater access perspectives as well. Also about diversity, it's all about difference, right? So that can, am I not sharing the screen?
We saw the camera. You're good.
Oh, okay.
You're just, it's back. Okay.
Okay. Whereas on the flip side of that, we need unity at times too, because it inspires collective action, that type of thing. But if you have too much unity, you can silence the voices of difference, right? If you think of it being just one voice in that. We go through this to say, how can we get the best of both diversity and unity and balance these two pieces in our approach? This is another way of thinking through the trade-offs that you all are going to have throughout this whole process. So what I'm going to have you do is go ahead and create your own based on an approach to community engagement that focuses on breadth versus one that focuses on depth. And then I'm going to have one that's focused on technical expertise versus lived experience, and one that is inclusion versus efficiency. And so I'm going to have you get into groups, 3 groups, each with a polarity map. And I'm going to skip the sticky notes for now. You're going to take your Sharpie with you, and you're going to just go ahead and write up on these sheets what are the best of each of these when we focus on them in our approach to community engagement, and what's our fear around focusing on those too much. Okay? Does this make sense, what I'm going to ask you to do?
Are you putting us in, so like that one will be lived experience versus that one will be breadth versus depth, that one will be,
We're not all doing all of them.
we're not all doing all of them.
No,
Do you want us to choose one that we want to be in or just?
I'm going to count you off.
Okay.
Yep. Okay. So we're going to go ahead and go, you're going to start here. 1, 2,
1,
2.
1.
okay. We're going to go 1, 2, 3. And I didn't quite finish writing up the words on these. So this one's going to be depth and breadth. This one is
You're in charge.
lived experience and technical experience. Or expertise. And then the last one is going to be efficiency and inclusion. All right, so you can go ahead and take your Sharpies, go to your spot and start generating things in each of the quadrants.
Yeah. This is 2.
Lot of,
Okay.
yeah.
All right.
So there's like the one side of the street and the other side of the street. So like one of the positives of being of utilizing inclusion.
Inclusion in terms of getting other people involved.
I believe so. I think that
Okay.
could be open to interpretation.
Okay.
And then what are like the drawbacks? And then the same of efficiency where like,
Oh,
yeah, yeah.
Oh, so this thing,
Yeah, kind of like that. Yeah, yeah.
I ran my business like this.
Sometimes you gotta.
Yeah, that's definitely. Okay. And so we just write things down.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I don't think it kind of results in your log was up on recently.
Okay.
It's fine.
like, yeah, like there's. You have real expertise.
Okay.
Lived experience, understanding, they're easy to understand.
Why is that?
This one's probably the most abstract of all.
Yeah, thanks.
But this one was also like, I could see you saying like, do you want to focus on a smaller group that we dive deep into the issues with too? Or do we want to reach the most community members?
If you want the experience.
Oh, no, now I got you.
Yeah, I guess I thought.
So there goes.
Yeah.
Let me see.
Good.
Yeah, I was just looking at the same thing, but you know, Dave's so sensitive with his writing that we're good.
This is for Dale, it's nine grand, I think that's the one, so yeah. Keep going.
Good.
Going back to the like, I feel like tackling with like misinformation. I don't need this. It sounds great. Do you think that more in depth is the topic?
Yeah, I mean, that could be either a positive,
That's all Gail has?
There's more coming in.
Okay, just making sure.
Yeah.
She's in police for now.
I told her she could do any of them.
Yeah. I'm gonna text you, I'll figure it. Those. Oh, we kept typing them all out to her,
She's typing into me and I am doing this.
so can she see what we already have?
Oh, yeah, that's good. Not telling me which quadrant, but I'm getting, I mean, I'm not getting scores.
Yes.
Yeah. That's the big one. Yeah.
She doesn't laugh, Joey, y'all better hurry up.
No, she's planning to have me.
The double
I'm
name.
waiting for intelligent input.
Yeah.
All right, what do you say?
I said that you're laughing, Jay and Dave with your feedback.
Well, we're two blockheads.
Let's put there.
No, no,
Go on the speaker.
you speak for truth.
You're in a lot, isn't it? A lot.
I gave up on my ego. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like we want to. Yeah. Well, I think sometimes like, you're right, affordable housing or in general, housing is so complicated that. They try to fix numbers. Yes, and then they try to, and like.
Who's a member of our?
Oh.
Explaining or actually maybe it's something more like, it. Is that?
Good one stuff.
Yeah, I think. Efficiency, yeah, but it's the greatest, excellent.
Go ahead and wrap up whichever one you're on. Go ahead and rotate this way. So you're gonna come here,
Howard in there, yeah.
you all are gonna come here, and you all are gonna go over there.
Good luck here.
Add to whatever they put before you. It's your chance to see what did they miss. This one is the most broad in terms of.
That's an interesting.
Yeah, yeah. That's broad in terms of an approach to both communication and community.
So if you're inclusive and you're being ambitious, you're like getting things done, you're.
The human
Answers, so experience as well as the, like.
Well, I don't know.
Numbers, like, if you would be.
Whereas breath is.
Not doing- If you're doing both, you'd be right in here, but I think what they're trying to do.
No, wait, am I? I thought like this means like if you're inclusive and efficient, you're here. If you're not inclusive and you're not efficient, you're here.
I think this was. positives.
Like what I'm saying, I don't understand what they're saying, that's like.
Here's why.
This is Gail, not red.
Quadrant, they're only looking at, we just do efficiency.
Yeah.
No, what's the positive of that?
So you say red.
Quick resolution.
You might get things done, you also might not.
Yeah, I think if you're like if you're just focused on. Mistakes.
Yes, the.
It's critical detail.
That's what. Into the weeds, so make all of our stakeholders. Our user stakeholders are the community people. They're the users of what.
No, too fast. Against the definition.
They're not being inclusive, those are like a negative for inclusivity.
No, this would be, what's the negative of only focusing on it being totally inclusive?
My brain's not.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
who may have done that wrong, but that's okay.
Yeah.
Do you think the conflict potential is important?
Just thinking the same thing.
It's like.
What you mean by that? Like, on the same wavelength.
Deep dive on.
Yeah, I know, it's hard to tell.
Offensive.
I guess if you're just being super efficient, then you're like not, I don't know, like you're not being very thoughtful. You're not actually engaging the community. If all you're doing is thinking about doing things fast, you're not like taking the time to.
Less community understanding.
Yes. Okay, perfect.
How do you?
Yeah, okay, we'll just keep.
We need to like, sometimes we can reconcile different perspectives.
Yeah. Like, yeah.
Right.
And
It's kind of like,
pieces.
no more way of saying
Most people,
but I might as well.
Right.
I think it's hard to come to consensus, like it's.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, I am thinking.
Transportation plan is
And I feel.
solving our transportation.
You could, it could, something like a project, very minimal support, and so I guess.
Yeah, that.
That's just.
Okay, gotcha. So it sounds like they're saying that's coming from like those technical
Does that mean it's? This is. We're gonna.
So.
Focus.
Yeah, like lack of full consensus. Even.
Yeah. Okay, that makes sense. Yeah, I wasn't sure what you meant, but it's
Gonna
very,
be
now I understand. Like, yeah.
51%, yeah.
May result in. Things that, slim majority. or-
Yeah.
I'd say lack of full consensus.
Yes. This is gonna take it.
Oh, nice. Okay.
So far.
Wrap up where you're at. Go take to the next station.
Substantial costs are huge. I would get this down, a lot of hydrogen power to be all free.
So it'll be interesting to see how that. These geothermal, but it's all commercial industrial use, which is like. It's like our whole airport expansion is on there, geothermal.
I mean, that's pretty incredible to see what is going on out there.
Yeah.
I have personally geothermal.
Yeah.
I think to have,
Yeah.
expertise
And so like cost overruns, like delays, not like the technical expertise.
Like, it was old technology, but on the commercial side.
Actually, we don't have that.
Had influence.
Okay.
Heat or existing radiators. You know, the old line. Yeah. You can do so much when it's new construction versus.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Retrofitting.
Yeah, like, we're doing retrofit.
Well, and actually that would be focusing a lot on lived experience and not on technical expertise.
All right, here, that's a negative of too much.
Spell that correctly.
Too much here.
There's a scale.
Oh,
Okay, yeah, let's put something down.
Maybe
Based on-
probably thinking of what's in the box. Yeah.
Let's say it's added.
But
I'm trying to think of a way to say like, yeah, like a positive, it's like being able to explain like, like decision-making processes to like the community.
Yeah, see, that's where you get there.
Just what would be,
Comes to life.
yeah.
I mean,
I just find.
it can be the, you know, the community engagement stuff is.
If you're,
Mostly
one of
so-
the positive things about focusing on lived
You know,
experience.
on all these.
Difference.
Right, you don't share
Yeah.
people.
And so
You know, like,
more information is okay.
Never read something mean because.
She's not flexible.
Stuff.
The warmest thing I had my whole.
No, and that's what you
I
have.
had.
Right.
Maybe that's why.
Yeah, 'cause that's why I doesn't think of it.
I have one state Lincoln account.
Yeah, like.
I think today is required.
7, I think.
I still have my, you know, he graduated high school, basically. This might be them on my LinkedIn.
Function.
Yeah, I think, you know, like, and Brown Racing was such a great example of people not getting engaged until they felt still at the last minute and then disinformation or really disinformation was twisting their own truth. Spiraled.
So being the bureaucrat, the community ultimately goes back on what's it gonna cost me here, and what's it gonna cost you.
You know, we have an interesting dynamic in Steamboat now over at Mark Stevens, so he's buying up shit to kind of build affordable housing. And so you say, oh, we're gonna compete with this guy. You know?
But that's the carrying capacity.
Yeah.
I know, like Riverside.
Great, I'm gonna pull this all back together. You don't have to, go back to your seats just yet. I want you to be able to return back to your original poster just to see what folks added. But then the next thing that I'm gonna have us do is, now that you've considered how to get the best out of each of these sides, rather than saying, okay, at the end of this, we're gonna vote and we're gonna choose left or right poll, right? We're gonna think about what parts of the process need more of which approach, right? So you're gonna go back to your seat and blue dots. I want you to put a blue dot on something that you think, you know what, for building a budget, I think this is about efficiency and technical expertise. Or if you feel like, no, that's actually about fiscal stewardship. And I think the community needs to have a voice in how much we're spending on this planning process. That's more of an orange, where you put that on that item. You can put it at the high level of items of like shared priorities. That might be one where I say, you know what, before we really get started, that's where we need some community voice, lived experience in here. Then when we get into completing a feasibility analysis, maybe I think we need more blue, right? So you're gonna go ahead, you can put it at the orange level, you can put it on purple items. But where do you think we need more of a focus on one of the polls? Okay, but you can go back to your original sheet first, see what folks added, And then you can go ahead and add your dots up here.
To that.
Mm-hmm.
And just to clarify, blue is technical expertise.
Depth and efficiency. Those three kind of are all connected a little bit, and then breath, lived experience, and inclusion are the other side of things.
Okay.
They're kind of different variations and.
Oh, orange, you said it's orange dot, blue dot.
Yeah.
Now I understand.
Yeah.
I know, I was confused for a second too.
That's what Okay, does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay,
Okay.
all right, so review what folks added to your original one, and then go ahead and put kind of how you think about where we need to focus our energy at different points in the process.
I told Gail this might be hard for her. That's in right.
Yeah.
Higher education.
This one,
We don't need to look.
the wages to do.
I think.
Gail, you might tell us,
Just like if you wanted to hold on to that.
these of our roles. Do we need the most engagement? Community engagement.
Whoops, can you say that again, Kale?
Yeah.
Create conflict.
What parts of our roadmap do we need the most community engagement? And where do we need to tap into experts the most? Is kind of what I want you to weigh in on.
Okay.
I don't know, because I feel
Talking
like,
about unrealistic.
like diverse communities can be a stakeholder, like you were saying before, like users,
But they're
you know.
different. I mean, some stakeholders are, they have different
Right.
perspectives, so is that
Y'all are
a
ready.
bad thing?
Right, because it seems to me they're saying like the opposite of inclusion.
Are we doing it as a group?
That's why I'm taking what they were saying.
Yeah, so you have dots at your spot at the table,
Oh.
and there's no limit on these. You can do as many dots as you want, so I have
I'm gonna
more.
put
if you
these
want
next
more.
just so I understand what's happening.
We're doing it in the
These blue.
Yes.
Yeah, but,
I just need to remember which dot is which.
no, but I think the dots go.
Oh, yeah, I'm just putting, so I remember like, oh, if I'm talking about
Oh,
inclusion.
now I understand, now I understand, okay.
No, it's confusing. It's
Okay.
everything.
Right. I think,
Okay, now I understand.
Yeah,
Like
okay.
visualize it.
okay.
And Jay, orange is touchy feely.
So,
Just for that, you get it.
I think it's very touchy.
the only one I haven't mentioned, I don't know what that's.
Orange is on.
I know.
Or is-
Thanks.
Orange is on.
Yeah.
So I'll get my dots and go over there.
We should even have a break. Get a break.
Yeah, come up, you're fine.
Love this part a little bit.
Blue.
Goes up there, right?
Yeah.
Anybody needs more?
Excuse me. I hear this came on and no. Show me my phone and you're great on.
You feeling person.
Okay.
Is it, oh,
I turn them all, it's like not. Well. We just give her a chance, but otherwise.
oh no, somebody's orange just fell off.
Yeah, the oranges are,
Less sticky.
less sticky.
Sorry about that.
No, shove it on.
We're on partners here.
Oh, you've been off. There.
Identify existing, overlapping.
It's like, you expect technology to happen, you know, it's like sticking out the field.
Where you can see it.
Yeah.
These are Gale stocks.
Yeah.
Okay.
Rob, are you really doing gill stocks or are you just making stuff up?
She is telling me things and also gave me very explicit permission to be her proxy.
That's who I was checking on.
Yep, nope, I did. I confirmed that. I gave my general sense. Said interpret as it makes
Not that
sense.
a planner would ever skew an outcome of a process.
It's just totally like him to do that. If anything, I'm almost like.
Whoever writes up the notes, that's what comes.
That's true. That is very much a planner thing, like the hardest thing is like feeling like you're distilling and not putting bias, even though bias is ever present. Like it's just like that is the.
Well, that's the dumbest idea I've ever heard. Not making.
Okay, so. I just took photos of these so that even if the sticky dots fall down, I have captured it. So, we won't lose any votes here. But I wanna basically take everything that we just kind of processed through and now come back together to tell the story that we're kind of seeing painted up here and what this would look like in practice for a comms approach and a community engagement approach. So I'll, take us back to I'll just flip between these slides to kind of give us a prompt to kind of think through. But the overall idea that I want to capture now is, as we're giving advice to comms team and the project team working on this, to kind of develop a menu of what could be different pieces that go with each of these elements. What do you see this picture looking like in practice? As you looked at how do we get the best out of each of these things? For communications or for community engagement.
Can you repeat the question?
It was a little complicated. So really at the simplest, I want to know, what do you imagine this all looking like in practice to get the best out of each of these sides of the pole throughout the process?
Be relative to community engagement.
I think Gail had like a general frame that she
Yeah.
sort of communicated to me, that maybe you could describe, Gail, for this notion of beginning, middle, and end, and sort of how these things sort of fit together.
Sure. I mean, I guess as I was thinking about it from the perspective of probably, at the beginning, kind of starting out, right? I mean, in terms of kind of more breadth and depth in terms of the community, engagement and getting the community's input in terms of how we want to move forward. Now, I think the cautionary tale there is we want to, it does need to be grounded, but then kind of moving into, okay, now we've got this idea, let's kind of truth test it with the technical aspect. And that's when you bring in the technical expertise as to, okay, here are how these various different scenarios are going to work. What's the feasibility? What's the cost implications? And then taking that back out, right? In terms of, okay, this is what we've heard. We've truth tested or grounded it in kind of the technical reality of it, and going back out from a broader community engagement perspective. And again, basically trying to build community support for kind of what the vision is. So taking kind of the vision, truth testing it against the technical kind of expertise, financial feasibility of it, and then, going back out from a broad perspective as to, okay, this is, if we see this is, kind of back to where we started our conversation as to, these are kind of the decisions that we as a community need to make, right? We may want this, but this may mean that it's going to cost more, right? Or, if we don't, in order to meet kind of the budget or the feasibility aspect of it, we need to choose this versus this. So that's kind of generally, what I gave my proxy to Brad to help with my dots.
I see what Gail's saying, connected to something I saw come up here in the lived experience piece on more value-based and then more fact-based, of like doing a first check-in on values, then building it out with facts, then checking back in, does this hit our values? Then going back to facts in some ways with what I hear Gail saying. What about
Thank
for other
you.
folks? Yeah.
I'm struggling with what community engagement actually means relative to the dots. Everybody in the community should have some say in what the vision statement says. I'm not sure, but is that practical? How would you create that? I don't know. I have no idea. The broader the group of people.
But when you're saying, just so we're clear on language, does orange connotate everybody in the community, or is it just saying we're trying to get broad engagement around that?
Agreed.
Those are fairly significant differences, right?
Yeah.
So just want to make sure when we're defining these things that we're clear. I think everybody should make sure they know that, like, in engagement, even when you say we want deep and broad engagement, it doesn't mean like the broadest of the broad does not necessarily mean you're gonna hear from everybody.
Okay.
Well, and this is a question, I didn't take it as like orange means we're going to go out and get community engagement on all of these things, but I think like I know we just created a purpose statement today, so I'll use that as an example. I think we created that purpose statement understanding the breadth of what has happened over the last few years and we tried to include some of the things, the negative and the positive that we heard from the last time around. So I feel like the purpose statement we created today did that. We weren't super narrow. We weren't super technical. We weren't in the weeds. I think we did, looking at where the orange dot goes, I think we did look at like the breadth of community perspectives when we created our purpose statement today, right? Like Dave said earlier, the people who were against it last time were like against it for one reason or another, but some of that was against it because of feasibility. We're against it because of this. So we looked at that and we put that in our purpose statement. So I think we're doing this already in some capacity.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean we need to go out and be like, everybody vote on our purpose vision.
Well, no, that's what I'm
Yeah.
curious, because engagement says, we're engaging. So
Yeah.
you're saying we've already engaged with a broader group.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's absolutely room for engagement, but to me, the orange wasn't like, we have to do public community engagement on this. It's like, we are looking at a wide breadth of this. We're looking at lived experience, we're looking at inclusion. And these are the things where we need to be doing that.
This is where I want us to fill in the story based on where we might each have our own assumptions about different things. And say like, okay, well, for me, I think developing a vision statement, we can go back to previous documents. Whereas for somebody else, you might say, I think we need to do some community forums there to double check that we've got to like test out our vision statement versus at evaluate scenarios. At that point, that's where I think we need to do community workshops or something like that. So this is the kind of, I don't know either. You fill in what you would like
Okay.
here. Yeah.
Well, I mean, but that makes sense, because what you're saying is not as broad, really, really broad.
Mhm.
Which makes this some sort of three-dimensional thing.
I guess when I think about the timeline, to back to your original question of like, what would these look like in practice? To me, like the roadmap, to use the term we've been saying, is like defining our shared priorities. We've been doing this for a year, not all of us in this room, but like we had phase one with community builders. We had the DST, we've engaged, like I think a lot of those came out of that. And so a lot of that is just being responsive to the previous engagement that's been done over the year. It doesn't mean there's not going to be more, but we kind of have a good idea of what those shared priorities are from the failed vote and the engagement that's taken place over the last 2 years. So then we're moving into like the next step of the roadmap, right? And when we are identifying like funding and sale or affordability targets and these feasibility analysis, like we're getting into the technical work. To me, is that next step of the journey. And throughout that process, there needs to be a wide breadth of community support or engagement in some capacity. But I think that's the progress that I'm seeing in that kind of the colors that reflect that. Once all the technical work is done and we have actually something tangible, like here's what's feasible, here's what our constraints are, here's what we're thinking, then we go back to the community again. So to me, it's kind of like we've engaged the community. Now we need to get technical a little bit. Then we go back to the community, is how I'm envisioning it.
Oh, Gail, yes.
Oh, thank you. I mean, I guess I'd like for the group to think about the benefit or risk of not kind of truth testing our statement, right? Kind of our vision. I think we just, again, to give us a little bit more grounding and kind of being confident in terms of how we want to move forward. And I think you talked a little bit about it, Angelica, in terms of, what are our tactics? And I think, we've learned a lot. We've reached out to a lot of people. I think there's, still pockets of people that we probably haven't connected with yet. So wanting to just make sure that and I think, as somebody said, we're not going to reach every person, and but we need to do what we can to start out with in terms of making sure that kind of everybody is aware of what's being done, what the thoughts are, and that we're at least headed in the right direction, and have the opportunity and know that there will be the opportunity for more input as we progress.
I think, I'm still a little confused. Go back to what Dave talked about before, using the word sustainability. if you ask the entire community about this or added that word to the vision statement or whatever it is, the feedback, how are you gonna synthesize what that means? You know, 7 people really have a hard time with corporate sustainability. You know, what does that mean? How do you synthesize that? How do you use it?
Why would you use it?
Well, no, I'm trying to understand how that process works.
Are you saying that in reference to Gail's comment?
Yeah,
How do we engage the community enough to know whether our vision statement?
Exactly.
Well, I feel like, kind of like what Angelica was saying about, we got a lot from the DST of like shared values, and also the facilitators did a great job of like creating shared understanding of what terms mean. So we were all on the same page of like what we were talking about, what that meant. So I think we can utilize some of that too in alignment with our vision statement, saying like, okay, well, we got this info from the DST. They're a good representation of, some of the populations within our community. So that could be a good reference point for us.
So how do we, I mean, I don't know, is this something that you guys do? Is this something, Lorraine does?
This is what community builders does all the time.
Okay.
This is pretty much what our work is to help. What we do is we come in and we work with the community. It starts as a partnership. They have to ask for help, and then we engage in a partnership. Both sides bring resources to the table, so it takes us out of consulting role. Then we work with the community to design a process, and every process is tailorable, but then we work through then like, what are your process goals? What are things you want to achieve? And what we try to do is make it so that they actually are developing the capacity to do this stuff once we're gone. But yeah, and I think this is a lot of what you guys do too. I think a lot of like Civic Canopy, like the difference might be Civic Canopy does a lot of working with people in kind of collaboration and sort of problem solving around a lot of different topics and issues. And ours is almost always like essentially planning processes and bringing people together in different situations for that. So between the two of us, you've got a lot of potential to offer ideas.
But I think you're asking about the community engagement.
Yeah,
That's not in your scope.
not for this project, but he asked, is this stuff you guys do as like a technical question?
So I think the question remains, who's doing this?
Oh, but I thought you were asking is this just like things we know how to do?
No, it's.
Who's going to do it? Oh, got it.
I have no idea. I mean, how do you absorb a broad spectrum of perspectives and distill that into something that's commonly accepted?
Well, I think those are like getting into the weeds of like, we're not there. I understand the question, but for the purpose of like this conversation, I don't think we need to dig too far into that. I think it's a good question by all means of like, who's going to do this work? Is it YVHA? Is it the city? Is it the county? Is it a partnership? Are we hiring an outside person? I do think those are not quite there yet.
I would push back a little and say, I think we need to figure that out pretty soon.
Okay.
Because I'm hearing a lot of comments about, we're not hearing anything. This is like deja vu all over again. It's taken a long time and we're not hearing anything.
I
From sort of community. So I think we need to figure that out. I mean, to Gail's point too, if we have a vision statement, if we want to get feedback from the community on that, we need to do that like now, soon, since we created it. So
Lou, is your question, okay, this feels like we want to hear from a lot of different people. How do you actually do that in a way that just doesn't turn into like a jumbled mess of lots of opinions? Are you saying like, how do you actually?
we're talking about community engagement. Part of that is telling people what we're doing, like Tom said. I think most of our community doesn't know. They may or may not know that we're here. They have no idea what we just went through. Most people don't know what the DST did and what the meaning of that is. And so there's a lot of people just blanks in their brains about what it is we're trying to accomplish.
So that's a communications thing in terms of like how we make sure we're communicating out. And then I think just to make sure we capture your other question is when you're in the process of engagement, at least as I understood it, seems like we're going to be talking to a lot of people. That's how do we make sure that we take that in and actually distill that information in a way that one is usable and two, there's trust in the community in that like it all went into the cheese grater and came out authentically, right? So I think, I just want to make sure we capture both of those elements.
We'll go Gail and then Jay, and then I'll talk a little bit. Gail?
Yeah, just a point of clarification. I would think that this would fall within the scope of the grant that we have, right? I mean, to the extent of the kind of the goal of the grant, the Belonging Colorado, that this would be within that scope. So I think maybe under, confirming that as well as understanding, just how much money's, left and could be allocated to doing something like this.
And if we go back to the kind of roadmap concept we've talked about, aren't we really just talking about here are the touch points of where we want to go out to the public and feedback? And then the second thing is how do we do that?
Yeah.
That's what I was getting at. I thought we were just like in the roadmap phase. I agree with you, and I'm glad that you pushed back because I think we are hearing that. But I just thought that this was more of like the roadmap and then get into
We can get into a process design from here.
Vision statement, though?
And good point, Dave, because I was gonna say something when Gail was saying that and kind of agreeing with you is like this is where I think it gets complicated. To Gail's point is like the efficiency, balancing the efficiency with like the depthness of it all is like if every single decision we make, then we have to go back to the community and say, we do this engagement to make a decision. We make the decision, then we go back, did we do it right? And then we do like then that's not really realistic. And so that was just my pushback of like, we can't just be like, okay, we made a vision statement, let's go back to the community. Okay, now we need to do this, let's go back to the community. Like it just.
Well, there's also, remember, there's the spectrum of the community engagement process. So it's communicating and informing and not really expecting for them to engage or participate in the process, all the way to like full-on collaboration.
Oh, like workshops.
So I don't necessarily think that I'm saying we need to like go all the way to the right side of the spectrum, but we do need to be communicating on a regular, consistent basis with the public about what it is we're doing and bring them along with us on this process. We need to be on the spectrum.
I have a relevant.
Speaking around.
Okay, so what you all are bringing up here is what Tom brought up yesterday of defining roles and responsibilities. There's a question coming up right now of who's doing this and designing it, right? So at the high level, we're thinking through if you all are putting together like a scope of work of engaging, whether it's a staff member at one of your entities or an outside contractor to help you do some of this comms and community engagement work, what would you tell them are your priorities? That's what we're communicating. Then the piece, Lou, of like, well, exactly how does that happen, right? That's up to that person who becomes responsible for that thing. But we want to know across the spectrum here, what are your priorities for when and how you'd like to engage? And to this point, at what level? Is at this point, this is at the level of consult. We put out a survey that says, here's our draft of this. What do you think of it? Right? Or is this at the level of collaborate? And we want to get together a group and actually have them engage with this here. Right? So if you're able to say, what are your priorities for engagement throughout the process? And similarly, on these elements that are technical, what are your priorities for the technical elements that we need to really make sure we communicate, right? Like, do we need to have really strong communication about zoning? Or is this something that we think actually, maybe not a ton of people are going to be super interested in, but a lot of people are going to want to know about the geotechnical aspects of the site or something like that, right? So what we want to know right now is what are your priorities for this stuff so that we could designate areas along the roadmap that you're seeking somebody to build it out, right, in more detail. And so these are good questions that Dave, like when you brought up, what is the extent of engagement we need around a vision statement to feel like we can move forward?
I also think the communities wants to look to us or would look to us for advice on what we're doing. I don't think they want to rehash all of this whole process either. They want to know what's going on and, what it looks like. I think it's the biggest interest. I don't think that they're wanting to steer us in the vision statement.
I agree, and I think that the next kind of major milestone for community engagement is around the scenarios. That said, I do see a lot of orange dots and sort of like understanding affordability needs and non-residential needs. So I think we need to put a pin in that and having a conversation. I think like the next major milestone is most likely engaging around the scenarios.
And I would just point to one thing in the public engagement side, is like keeping them focused within the umbrella of feasibility. And keep the conversations so that the public doesn't take us in a different direction that's not feasible.
And that's where the purpose statement you all came up with is helpful for naming what are your constraints on the planning process this time. So you're not in pie in the sky, we're thinking through what are feasible solutions to this. So far I'm hearing this first sort of section between develop vision, revisit non-residential communities, and attainability and affordability. The primary focus here is going back and synthesizing previous engagement with a potential light touch with community to make sure we're on the right path. Then the bulk of engagement happens when we get into scenario planning, where folks are able to go up the scale of the IAP2 spectrum toward maybe involve, collaborate, that type of thing. Does that feel right so far? Okay. And then what happens, what do you picture later on as we get into the development plan and annexation?
I will just say from learning from previous experience, I think that YBJ did a lot of engagement around coming up with a development plan, and that we had a harder time or just didn't do enough engagement with the annexation concepts. And so learning from that, I think that we need to do more when we get to annexation, but that could be kind of resolved if we're co-creating the development plan and the annexation agreement at the same time.
Would that be informing folks about the annexation process, or do you need people's input on the annexation itself?
I think we're probably going to need more input.
I think that's interesting. You get input when everybody votes. The question is everybody informed sufficiently to vote appropriately? They understand what they're voting on. I can tell you that not everybody understands the development. Maybe that's the place where you focus and explain what the development plan is. We did a lot of outreach on the development plan, but did we outreach to all of the appropriate parties? And I think that's where there was falling down. We didn't capture all of the stakeholders that we needed to capture.
Yeah, Clark.
Just want to share a couple thoughts, just perspective. I think it's useful just to sort of step back and remember like why we're here and how we got here. Fair or not, a lot of people who were frustrated with the last process felt they didn't have sufficient level of voice in it, and that the people that were engaged in a certain way that did give, at least from those who didn't feel as well engaged, they gave voice to some people, but not to us or not to me. I didn't feel like I got to shape those. That's a pretty common experience. The other very common dynamic that we see is there's an inherent interest towards action. And I'm hearing it with most of you guys of like, we want to get this thing done. Well, you're way farther behind because of the fact that like last time engagement didn't work. And that's not to say there wasn't good effort to it, but to think that you're going to sort of come back with another approach that is actually maybe even less engagement and get farther along from sitting where I'm sitting. And I feel like I would be doing a disservice if I didn't tell you guys that that would fly in the face of the experience of my last 20 some years doing these things. And so what can be helpful is both thinking, when we look at the engagement spectrum, the reality is, you want to kind of find places where you can move across that spectrum. And ideally, you want to think about the experience you want people to have and identify a set of overarching process goals of, because of this, what's going to happen in terms of the process. We're going to build trust. We're going to bring people together around a shared vision. We're going to build, I could give you a number of different examples of a group like this coming together and be like, these are the process goals. You use that to design, but with some principles behind that, which are that you need breadth and depth. And you guys are going through and defining where those points are. So that's good. But in general, imagine if Kayla and I had come, and we could have built all of this out for you and just presented it in a couple of slides at the beginning of this workshop. It would have been a lot faster, but I don't think you guys would have understood these stages as well, or the decisions, or felt as bought into what we're doing. So the efficiency perceived in we'll figure it out and run it by people generally doesn't come to fruition. And I bring this up the way I'm bringing it up because a lot of times we're brought in after a lot of things have happened not good, and a community's like, all right, we're ready to try a different approach. And so far, we haven't had an experience where it hasn't worked. I mentioned to some of you guys, like I was down in Silverton the other day, and to hear the progress that they've made there over the last 4 years since we finished the Compass plan with them is crazy, because they were at each other's throats, like national news level of conflict. And the process it's not only getting done, I think all of you have seen that, they're making headlines in the state for the amount of affordable housing they're getting built, which, the housing director the other day was like, that comes from the work that we did in the process. But the kind of community fabric has changed, the leadership fabric, the culture changed. So it takes more time. That took a lot of time. People didn't like it in the beginning. They're like, oh my God, it's going to take forever. But I'm just encouraging you guys to think, like, if you want to get this thing done, and I can understand the perspective of, we've already thought through all this, we've already done it. But I just want to encourage you guys that stepping back to think about how can we really involve people in a way that they can get their hands dirty. Doesn't mean every single person. So that's where breadth and depth come together. Depth means some people are going to really help us go deep. Depth is things like storytelling, like proximity in conversations where people are in small groups really talking to each other about values and things that matter. Breadth is surveys and big workshops and dots on walls, because we're just sort of gaining, and you need them both. You use breadth to gain a sense of things. It's like mapping out territory, and you use depth to get much more granular level understanding of things and test things and understand, like, everybody seems to be saying this, help us understand what that really means. So, all I'm trying to suggest is maybe think about this in a way where you're asking, what would it look like for us to come out of this on the other side with some meaningful community engagement objectives, like we knocked them out of the park. And even if that takes a little more time, is that going to give us a better chance of being successful? I don't think anybody's saying we don't want to, but I just caution against things like establishing the goals and vision for this place. Yeah, you guys do know, but like, apparently it wasn't aligned last time. That's part of the problem you guys had. And so at least it doesn't mean you have to start from scratch and everybody has to go and rebuild it, but finding ways to meaningfully bring people into that would be useful.
So I'm gonna have to cut you off here just because I was going off of this clock and we're actually at time, so I apologize.
The clock is undefeated.
Can I get, so we're gonna continue this conversation into next time but our team, this is good data for us to go forward, synthesize and bring back to you again. Can I take 5 minutes to do scheduling? Okay. Here's what we have from survey results, and I'm wondering if we can see if there's ways to tweak these times that will allow us to find a next time to meet. The idea is that we will take these next 2 meetings to complete this planning process for the roadmap itself and arrive at consensus on the kind of final elements that will present back to your organizations in the community. Greens, I would love to do a pair of dates that go together, the 4th and 5th, the 17th and 18th, the 20th, 22nd, and 23rd. Unfortunately, my blues have less votes on here. So I'm looking to folks who might have conflicts on either the 4th, 17th, or 23rd and see if we can find sometimes that work, or the option here is to do an all day on June 5th.
I'm not available at all July 22nd or 23rd.
Okay, so we're gonna toss those out.
I'm not available on the 4th or the 5th.
Okay, then we're looking at 17th and 18th. On these dates, what doesn't work for folks?
I think I was gonna say, I can rearrange things on the 17th and 18th.
For me.
Thank you, Gail, for doing that, and thank you, Gail, for calling in from Belize.
Well, thank you guys for making it work.
Are you at the Banyan Resort?
No, no.
Okay, so we're gonna go ahead and do 17th and 18th at these times. Brad will send us our invites. And we will get working on synthesizing things to come back. We'll finalize our, we've got our roadmap. We'll digitize this so we can make sure that this all looks good. We'll talk through roles and responsibilities. We'll talk through community engagement. We'll finalize our purpose statement and we'll pull it all together.
I didn't want to stop it in the meeting, because I think everybody else here is obviously more important. The 18th, I'm committed with family, but I'll figure out if I can come in remotely, or if not, you guys can hold me.
Okay. All right. Thank you all. That's everything we've got. So we'll go ahead and close out the online meeting. See you later, Gail.
All right, thank you very much. Thanks, as I say, for working with my schedule and letting me participate. I know it took a little bit of extra work, so I do appreciate that.
Problem.
Yeah.
Thanks all.
Thank you.